Hey everybody! If you would like to use closed captioning while you are watching this live YouTube stream, head on over to the CC icon, click it, it will turn red right underneath it, and subtitles in English will automatically get started. If you want to change the language that the subtitles are shown in, click Settings, go up to Subtitles, and then click on Auto Translate, and then you can choose the language that you would like your subtitles to show up in. We would also like to remind you that these live sessions are intended for adults and will be publicly shared. Please refrain from sharing any personal details about yourself or your child during the Q&A segments or in the chat of these sessions. If you need translated transcripts of the live event in any of the 9 languages from the New York City Department of Education, including English, those will be made available afterwards with the recorded session. Thank you, and get ready for Weekend Wellness.
Welcome, everybody. How y'all doing? Welcome to Weekend Wellness. My name is Dr. Olajide Williams. We're coming to you live and direct from the New York City Department of Education and Hip Hop Public Health. So I'm the founder of Hip Hop Public Health. We're a nonprofit. We use the power of music, art, science, and culture to inspire healthy behaviors in communities of color. I'm also a tenured professor at Columbia University. I'm a real practicing physician on the front lines during COVID-19. I'm also a health disparities researcher, and I'm currently the co-chair of Columbia University Medical Center's Anti-Racism Task Force. So we are in the middle of a watershed moment in our nation's history. It's a historical moment conceived in the tragedy of a pandemic and the reckoning of racial justice. It's a raw moment, an emotional moment in which hope, for too long eviscerated by systemic racism, is beginning to be reborn in the hearts and minds of a new generation. A diverse coalition declaring to the world that enough is enough. And so today's topic could not be more relevant. We're going to be talking about toxic stress, about racism, about the impact of racism on physical and mental health, and some of the things that we can do to mitigate these effects on our health. I see Munson Steed in the house. Hey, Munson, how you doing?
What's happening, brother? I just want to say congratulations. This is so important, Doc, to all of you, Sister Cox, to my brother Chuck, for everything that we do. Fight the power. Obviously, he's been on this. The trail of trauma is real. Having this discussion will heal. We're just happy that Rolling Out is also able to broadcast this. Black media matters. Black life matters. And the partnership that we have with Hip Hop Health, Public Health is critical to changing the destination of our children and our futures of our entire race in this country. So I want to say what's up to you. Just want to say we're proud of the partnership that we have. And Chuck and Mix Cox, tell the truth. Continue to allow our stories and our voice. And Chuck, I just wanted to say I love you. I love Dr. Williams, and I love you, Sister Cox. And Rolling Out is here forever to serve the community and to highlight these voices. So I just want to say thank you to the whole New York City public affairs departments, really in health, for letting this voice be heard and shine. And Doc, you know, I love all of you guys there, that what you do at Hip Hop Public Health is so important to our community. And Sister Cox, continue to be the future of our Black community, because we love you too. Chuck, peace. We'll see you more, and we'd love to share this on Rolling Out.
Thank you, Munson. We love you, Munson, and you've been a good friend to us over the years. I just want to introduce Miss Dena Cox, a dynamic health education specialist from the New York City Department of Education's Office of School Wellness, who is supporting this session today. I'm also thrilled, absolutely thrilled, to introduce my good friend, advisory board member of Hip Hop Public Health. Look, Chuck and I, we've been rolling since 2007, but what Chuck didn't know is back in the days when I was just a young kid, you know, dreaming of becoming a doctor, I was inspired by Chuck's music. He is the one and only. He is an iconic artist, an activist, a writer, a pioneer, a social justice leader. I just want to welcome you, Chuck. Thank you both for being here today. You know, I don't even know how you know I'm going to be able to keep my emotions together, because you know we're about to have a really deep conversation. But Dina, you know, how about a few remarks from you and kind of let everybody know why this is important to you and to the New York City Department of Education.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. Good morning, everyone joining us this morning, including parents, caregivers, and family members, especially those who are experiencing loss and grief during this time. Is that you have a few minutes for your own self-care. Thank you so much for our students, and we're all coping with both the challenges of the current pandemic as well as the effects of hundreds of years of systemic racism. A few moments each day on our wellness can help us build the resiliency we need as we work towards justice and inequity. Helping our students develop these skills needed to practice self-care in today's world is that the Office of School Wellness Programs focuses on as a part of serving the whole child. High-quality health education and PE, we show students how to improve their own social, emotional, and mental health, and to advocate for their health as well as the health of their communities and our communities. In this national reckoning of racial injustice and health inequity, we recognize that students from years past, who actually may now currently be caregivers, especially those of color, may have gone through our schools without consistent PE and health education. I want you to know that we see you, we care about your wellness, and your children have the right to these subjects by law and described in our citywide wellness policy. Your children is what we want for you. Principals and schools can't do it alone. They need your help and your input. Consider joining or starting a school wellness council at your school to make sure that these wellness-related instruction and programs remain a focus for our children. Community partnerships are also essential for school wellness, which is why I'm so happy that we've partnered with Hip Hop Public Health in this series. I'm so excited to share this space with their founder, the hip hop doc, Dr. Olajide Williams, as well as hip hop legend and social justice advocate, Chuck D. I'll be highlighting how we can ensure that students get the resources they need to manage stress, build resiliency, and advocate for themselves and against racism. Thank you for caring about the health of your children, your loved ones, and yourself. And we hope that today is as joyful and inspiring as your children are to us. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Dina. So Chuck, you know, you are you're a busy man, and I know that you know it's early over there on the West Coast, but I also know that you take it very seriously what we're talking about today, and so I was just hoping that you can help just you know let the parents and the children and the New York City Department of Education folks who are watching this today, can you tell them why it was really important for you to be here with us today before we get started?
Well, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Jide, as always, and I'd like to thank you, Ms. Dena Cox, and also the great job of Munson Steve. And Munson Steve has climbed the mountain of media to fight for the point of view of the undervoiced, the fight for the point of view of Black folks, who often, when it comes down to our magnification in the mainstream, or our projection of who we are in the mainstream, it's skewed pretty much to the dramatic, or not so, I guess, beneficial to, I guess, the masses of people who are drawn to figures such as in athletics and entertainment. And unfortunately, we don't have the stories that are projected by a sister like Miss Cox, who's a shining example of leadership. And so I just think we're at a crossroads where, you know, the leadership has never been in athletics and entertainment. Those are the prisms that's supposed to distribute the light to the people in the areas like yourself, Dr. Miss Dina, or even Munson Steed, who does it as good as, or better than Tom Brokaw to us, because he breaks down the real nitty gritty, so to speak. So I just think we're at a crossroads right now where I always think it's necessary when you give me a call, doctor. And matter of fact, the first time you met me on referrals by people like Dougie Fresh and Easy AD from the Cold Crush Brothers, you sat down with me personally and said, with my my status, so to speak, and as far as being a person with the light always shined on them in the media circles and entertainment for who I am and what I've done, it's very important we tie into the area of our overall mental and physical health. What's our intake? What's understanding, you know, what do you take in? How do you get it out of yourself? How do you not be a victim of industry that will depend and rely and even bet on you getting sick at an early age? Doctor, by no coincidence, over the last 3 to 4 months, as far as you want to say music and entertainment and hip hop, we've lost 5 of my peers, 5 in the last 5 months of my peers before the age of 60. From Ecstasy for Houdini, Prince Marky D, Black Rob, and DMX just a couple weeks ago. And then yesterday, Shock G from Digital Underground, all under the age of 60 years old. And when you came to me, I would think it was 15 years ago, we had talked about that the projection of the lifestyles that have been projected through the music, through sight, sound, story, and style of the culture is not so beneficiary. It won't benefit us as a people in the long run if this is the steady diet, no pun intended, of what we're going to be getting through all these areas, entertainment. All right, you know, Pastor Cavassier, you know, like, okay, who is that for and what age and how much of it do you do? There's no, yes, sir.
Yeah, but you know, you bring up a big point. You just mentioned some of our fallen brothers in hip hop. Rest in peace. But the point that you bring up is a point around. Let me just call it life expectancy. Right. So if you look at life expectancy in the United States, it has been increasing for many, many years. It's continued to increase. You know, I think we're at 78 or 79 right now, average life expectancy. Right. For the first time in a long time, life expectancy in the United States in 2020 dropped. It dropped by 1 year for an average of all Americans. But what's concerning to me is if you look into the numbers, at life expectancy, it dropped by approximately 9 months among white Americans. And this is all because of COVID and all the ramifications of COVID. You know, it's not just COVID, it's not just the pandemic. There are pandemics within the pandemic that the pandemic is driving.
Right.
But if you look at the numbers, Chuck and Dina, and if you look deeper into the numbers, you see that 9 months for white Americans, 2 years for Hispanic Americans, that's a decline in life expectancy, and 3 years for Black Americans. And you
Right.
know who's leading the pack? Black men.
Yeah.
Black men are leading the pack. So we have lost 3 years in average life expectancy. This is the richest country in the world. Life expectancy should not be going down at all. And it was scandalous the way it went down.
Right.
But it should not be going down with such in such a disproportionate and unfair way. And the question I have is why, and the question we should be talking about is why did life expectancy drop 3 years among Black men, 3 years among Black men, 2 years among Hispanics, and an average of 9 months among white America? There's got to be something wrong, right, Chuck?
Well, it's the isms, and education sets you free. But if you have all the isms, sexism, racism, institutionalism, and you're told and you're fed from other aspects that don't look out for your behalf, and you're continually educated through. I mean, look, culture is a thing that separates, that kind of liberates us. It ties us together as the human family, and it separates all the differences. It puts it to the side. But however, you got to fill it with something that's beneficial to that total human family. If you think that, all right, as a young person, that okay, it's just relative to where you are, and you're not thinking ahead at that because that's old and you're young, then numbers don't lie. Numbers have to be looked upon with a seriousness that says, when somebody uses youth as an excuse, I look at them and I say, well, you're not 4. You're 21. Yeah, matter of fact, you're part of the adult body. There's some things that you should be doing now, but they say, hey, look, I wasn't taught this, or I didn't get this in my school system, or I didn't know this was out there. And we're at a time where we have what you call the World Wide Web, but there has to be a teaching on how to be literate through these screens. If the screens are there, or is it a toy or is it a tool? Is there such thing as net literacy? No. Is there net etiquette? No. You have the gadget, but the gadget is dictating to you as opposed to you operating it and seeing what's worth in there for you to have the betterment of your life. Because the isms are laced into all the institutions that we have out there. We have the isms are in the job field. The isms are in the school field. The isms are in the practices of medicine and the areas of physical and mental health. Nobody had a concise conversation generally to the community, Hispanic or Black community, like, yo, listen, there are pre-existing conditions that needed a conversation and the narrative. Now you got that compounded with a lot of mental health issues to the point like, okay, it looks like it's getting clear, but what does that mean for you? Now what? What are you going to do now? And before, this is sort of institutionalism, and I'm not going to be heavy on that word. I'll be light on that word. When somebody tells you as a direct order what you got to do, wear a mask all the time. These are governmental orders. Wear a mask all the time. This is coming down. Stay in the house or else. You can operate this, but you can't leave here. For a 9-month period, an entire year, people were told what to do. Now the pressure is the free fall. Okay, I'm not going to tell you anything because you're good to go now. Now what? You had a year chopped out of your time. Where's your state? Who am I? Where am I at right now? What does this mean for me? We had devastating loss, and now everything is eerily quiet and silent. What answers to that right now? You would think that culture would actually, answer to some things, but we're in a different time. Usually culture used to be able to be that alternative, like, okay, you're not getting this, so you'll get a little bit of that, which will lead you into maybe having a thorough education on yourself and where you need to go. But that needs to be steered in a certain way, because we're in times where people need those voices, that alternate voice, and people also need the confidence in themselves to be able to not only individually go forward, but to grab as many people by as they can to go forward as a collective. That's
Yeah,
my
and
opinion.
you mentioned education a few times, Chuck, and it's really important that we really get educated about this, and Dina, racism and the toxic effects. A lot of people don't realize that it does more damage to the child than a lot of people realize it's doing. As a neurologist, I study the brain. And one thing that we know is that children who have experienced trauma and who are going through toxic stress, their brain actually develops differently to the brains of children who are well nurtured and not going through toxic. In fact, if we scan the brains of children who are going through this trauma, and we scan the brains of children who are not going through trauma, we see certain brain regions are smaller. They are underdeveloped than children. So trauma actually changes the way your brain grows and causes certain brain areas to be smaller in size than other brain areas. We talk about the prefrontal cortex, which is in the frontal lobe. We talk about the temporal lobe. These are two areas that we know are underdeveloped. And what are these areas responsible for? They're responsible for our emotional regulation. They're responsible for our thinking, our judgment, our executive function. Now, if trauma is affecting our kids, not just from a mental health perspective, in terms of our anxiety and our depression, if it's affecting our kids neurologically and putting them at a neurological disadvantage, my question to you, Dina, is what are the school systems doing to first identify these traumatized kids, and what type of systems do you have in place to help them?
Starting route to international terminal. Thank you so much. So I can't speak to what schools, like all 1,800 schools in the Department of Education are doing specifically to address this, but I know that I can give two examples of how, as an entire Department of Education, that we're trying to address identity, specifically race in our schools. So first, we have something called culturally responsive sustaining pedagogy, where students use their own identity to get education. They learn using aspects of their race, their social class, gender, language, sexual orientation, etc., just all their identities to basically get education and learn. So while New York City is a diverse city, we also know that there's a lot of bias and inequality that happens in our city. And so we want to give students mirrors that reflect the greatness of who their people are and windows into the world that allow students to connect across cultures. And school wellness councils are a great way to shape how that looks in schools. And we'll give some more examples or more definitions of what school wellness councils can be. Another way is learning about how to support our students who are experiencing racial bullying or racial violence in their school. Specifically around restorative justice and discipline. So basically a school wellness council, for example, can examine how these policies, specifically the discipline code and the wellness policy, are being applied in ways that support victims of racist bullying. And it can also look at how these policies can be better implemented in the school and more equitably implemented in the school so that we can reverse the trend of our students of color, specifically our Black students, being disciplined at higher rates than their white peers. There are also guidance counselors, social workers in school sites that can address students if we're talking about trauma, especially racial trauma, which is a chronic type of trauma. There's social workers, there's guidance counselors in the school building that can address and help students walk through coping mechanisms and skills through that and just have a conversation about that. But again, I can't speak to how all schools are specifically addressing this work.
That's great, Dina. And Chuck mentioned isms. And so this is probably a good time to put up some of the isms. Can we put up the slide on the different types of racism? And so this is a slide that just shows some of the, they call it the 4 types of racism. But to be completely frank, it all begins with bias. it begins with bias. Bias is really prejudice in favor of or against a thing, a person, or a whole group. And bias is everywhere, and it affects everyone. There's gender bias, there's sexual orientation bias, there's weight bias, there's political bias, and there's so many others. But we're here to discuss racial bias. So racial bias can be explicit, like the white supremacists, the folks that were charging into Congress, with white supremacy flags. It could be explicit or it could be unconscious, right? The unconscious bias is actually more pervasive. That's the one that is harder to root out. And when you have this unconscious bias, which is driven by social stereotyping, Chuck talked a little bit about this. What happens is that this bias manifests as personal or interpersonal racism, which is the racism, the bias that exists between individuals, and then those individuals who harbor this bias then translate that bias, they codify it into policies, into procedures and policies of institutions. So the individual who's biased creates biased policies, discriminatory practices, and then the whole institution is operating out of bias. And then you have the power structures of all of these institutions, whether it's an institutions in the media sector, an institution in the political sector, an institution in the in the money sector. If all of these institutions have biased policies and procedures, that begins to change the societal norm around how a certain group should be treated and how we feel about a certain group. If the media portrays a certain group a certain way that's driven by unconscious biases, then society is going to unconsciously imbibe those biases and start operating on those biases unconsciously. And this is how stereotyping becomes generalized. And that's a problem when you're seeing it on a societal scale. When you're seeing it on a scale that marginalizes and impoverishes whole communities. And this is why, Chuck, back to you, this is why we're seeing such terrible mental health, so much toxic stress, and so much disease in communities of color. There is no biological basis for racism.
Right.
Forget eugenics. All those people who try to prove it, forget about it. Hopefully we can come to an agreement that this is not biological, this is social. This is a socially constructed problem. And the only way for us to deal with it is through socially constructed solutions. So I'm just curious, Chuck, with regards to the megaphone you had and hip hop and the power of hip hop. Do you think there are more things that hip hop can do as a collective to really begin to dismantle some of the things that we're seeing in American society?
Yeah, you got to widen the diversity and destroy the stereotypes. I mean, and stop, being considered anomalies. Like, I'm pretty sure, doctor, when you had to discuss a serious situation with somebody, you might have gotten, especially early in your career, you got double looks or triple look, like, yo, can you find me somebody that will co-sign, what you're telling me? So right there, bias plays in. The same thing with an educator. It's like, okay, I don't know if I can actually take that instruction from you. We're in a country really that hasn't been used to taking the instruction from darker people. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
I've been turned away from patients. I'll keep it real. I'm going to keep it real right now. I have been turned away by patients, Chuck.
Yeah.
I've had patients tell me, we don't want to see you. We want to see a white physician. And it broke my heart. I'm coming in there with a whole group of people. I've got my students, my residents. I have a whole entourage walking into the patient's room. The patient looks at me, and when the last time this happened, it was devastating. And the patient says, I'd like to see someone else. But you know who it was devastating to? It wasn't devastating to me, because this is how we live.
Right,
it was
right,
devastating for my students,
right.
you know, my
Yeah.
white students and white residents who had to witness that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know what I'm
bias is a situation, man, in the United States of America. Because I mean, to broaden out what we're talking about into international, it goes into all kinds of different rabbit holes. But the fact that, you know, we're living in a country that's not used to taking any counsel and instruction from a darker face, which is really it's primitive to think that way. You know what I'm saying? So you're judged by, Dr. Martin Luther King said he wanted his children to be judged by their character, not their characteristics. You know, and whenever you can't even look at that clearly, you're embedded in bias. Where even the people who had the bias to go into academy, they got to also believe the bias. But a lot of them, generationally speaking, might believe the bias so much they believe that that's the order of things, and they respond to the code. You know,
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
got to get out of this thing like, oh wow, you're an anomaly. I had a college degree when I started my rap career, so I was a anomaly. But I was like, well, what the hell? That means you're reducing the area that I am getting into to elevate, but I don't look at it as being reduced. It's just an aspect of the arts that needs explaining and curation, and you're not up on it like I understand it. You know what I'm saying?
You had a
So,
college degree.
the bias is permeated so many sectors that the end result. Sometimes, you know, I mean, I might look at a basketball game and see that, you know, 9/10 out of the commercials are all pharmaceutical commercials, you know what I'm saying? Instead of, you know, like how you can avoid the pharmaceutical in the first damn place. So,
Yeah,
I mean, it runs deep, and the rivers swell in that type of activity in this country. So I just think the diverse, you got, you know, the art form, when it diverses and points to people doing real things, that's when music and culture and arts are at its best. Art is not real. It's art is a short term for artificial. It's a facsimile of real life, but it should point and reflect. It reflects, it inspires. That's a back and forth that goes. But once again, the arts are not taught. And unless art is subjective, but it's not, you know, I mean, it has to be taught because it is a form of communication that's cyclical. You know, it's give and take. I take in, I give out, we exchange. It's alternative communication.
I love it. Dina, how is this connected to health education? You know, that there's so much we need to teach our kids. And I'm
Yeah.
curious how you folks at the Department of Education handle health education on these specific issues.
That's a great question. Thank you, Dr. Williams. So I'll first start by describing what health ed is all about. Since in the past, health education for a lot of people was inconsistent or like non-existent for a lot of New Yorkers, especially those in communities of color. So health education is now a required academic subject for students in all grades. Students learn skills like self-management, communication, advocacy, and digital citizenship. I know Chuck D was talking a lot about being a netizen and digital citizenship, and that's something that we are definitely teaching our young people. We teach them all these skills in order to take care of their minds, their bodies, and their relationships with each other. When it specifically comes to race and identity, not only are health teachers able to talk about race in the classroom, they should talk about it, and they're actively encouraged to talk about it. From kindergarten to 12th grade, students are learning skills around how to accept and embrace each other's differences, how prejudice, discrimination, and bias can lead to trauma and violence, how adverse consequences, strategies for managing and expressing difficult emotions, and how to be an upstander when they see bullying happen. To learn more about all the concepts and skills that your young people are learning in the classroom, you can reference our new K-12 scope and sequences, our new K-12 health education scope and sequences, and those links should be dropped in the chat soon. And very simply, a scope and sequence is a document that describes for a curriculum in a classroom what concepts should be taught and in what order they should be taught in.
That's fantastic. You know, I just want to also mention at Hip Hop Public Health, we combine art and music with science to really deliver a health education. And we're fortunate to work with people like Chuck, on some of these projects over the years. But I just want to just say something more, Dina, about children, because
Yeah.
a lot of people don't, when we talk about racism, you often see adults talking about racism. You often hear conversations about racism among older people, but a lot of people don't know that 1 in 5 African-American fifth graders have reported to experience racism. These are our fifth graders, right? 1 in 5 of them experience racism. And this is on top of the conditions in which they live, the context and the conditions and the marginalized conditions in which they live. And so what happens is that, their ability to cope with their ability to deal with trauma, on top of these issues gets overwhelmed, and they develop toxic stress. And toxic stress, can really affect a child's ability to learn, to cope, to build healthy relationships with peers and adults. I've already mentioned that it can affect brain development of these children. Some of the symptoms of toxic stress for parents who might be watching this include, difficulty sleeping, increased anxiety, some increased irritability and aggression, some hyperactivity, and some, emotional, regulation issues, some problems eating, could be overeating or undereating. All of these are toxic effects of stress, are plaguing our children. Sometimes children, they just act out and they don't seek help. So it's incumbent upon us to recognize the toxic stress that are occurring in our children and try to address it. Because just real quick, people don't know that the brain continues to develop until age 21 in women and age 22 in men. And the last part of your brain to develop is the part of your brain called the prefrontal lobe. And that's the part of the brain that's involved in all the executive decision making, your judgment, your ability to kind of operate in the rubric of society. All those nuances around your cognitive executive abilities, they develop last in the brain. And if the child is under stress often, all the time, and that brain is constantly being affected by stress, what happens? What happens to that brain? Let me paint an analogy, right? So if you walk out of your room and you see a tiger, you're going to go into what we call fight or flight mode. So either you're going to try to wrestle that tiger or you're going to run. And there's also a third mode called your freeze mode. And so even from an evolutionary perspective, we needed to have this system to protect us from these threats, these physical threats, right? So we go into fight or flight mode. But when a child whose brain is still developing is exposed to situations that activate that system, it could be violence in the city streets. It could be the secondary trauma of watching George Floyd get killed. It could be the secondary trauma of being pulled up by the police on the street. Look, my son said to me the other day that, Daddy, I was on my way to the grocery stores and a police car pulled up on the side and I had a surge of anxiety. That's that tiger in the room. And so if a child is growing up with these experiences, then what's happening to that child is the fight and flight response. That system, that evolutionary system that's designed to protect us from threat, it starts activating and activating and activating and activating. And what happens is that there's overactivity in one part of the brain and there's underactivity in another part of the brain. And so the brain doesn't develop the way it's supposed to develop. And remember what I said, Dina, that it continues to develop until age 21 in women and age 22 in men. And so not only are you dealing with the toxicity of the environment, you're at a disadvantage because of the way your brain developed in response to that environment. But there's hope. And this is what I want to mention. And what is the hope? The hope is that our brains are very elastic. We call it brain plasticity. And what that means is that we have an incredible capacity as human beings to heal and to recover. And how do we heal these children? We heal them by nurturing them. We call these buffering activities. We heal them with love. We heal them with care. We heal them by showing them that we care for them. These buffering activities have an incredible ability to heal the brains of children who are going through this toxic process. But again, it's important for us to recognize it, because if we don't recognize it as children, it stays with you until when you become an adult. And then you start having more hypertension, and you start seeing young brothers dying young of diseases that you're dying old from. But people don't realize that it starts when we're young. These stresses, they accrue in our bodies, and they weaken our bodies when we're young, and they weaken our minds. And sometimes we don't have the resilience because society has deprived us of the resources. And so I think it's really, really important for us to really make people recognize that this situation that we find ourselves right now, Chuck, is an opportunity, because we have ears today. You know, we have the ears through what Black Lives Matter are doing and keep doing. We have the ears of a new generation that have grown up more tolerant than the generation that came before them. And the question I have, Chuck, is how do we harness this? How do we make the verdict with Chauvin just last week? How do we make sure that type of verdict is not an isolated verdict, but it's a verdict that will begin a whole change across the justice system? How do we make sure we don't go backwards again?
Well, this generation especially listens with their eyes. And I mean, you can just check the apparatus. You know, people are tuned in to not listen, but they are watching, and they listen with their eyes, which means that's a pro and con. It means that you see something happen, but it can be tricks in front of your eyes. It could disappear, and people could fall into slots that they thought that they climbed out of long ago. The biggest difference between Fight the Power that we said as a song in 1989, and when we had a few friends and peers also reiterate that during the beginning of the Chauvin revolts in 2020, the biggest difference and the main difference is that it's 31 years apart. The people that were in the middle of the mix in 1989, a lot of them are no longer here. Also, people who were in the middle of the mix last year protesting against the isms of what happened, they were born after that benchmark of that saying of a fight to power, which was the second fight to power after I was inspired by the Ozzy Brothers in 1975. All this to mean that is that generations, 2 or 3 generations, when they pass, you know, you can't have it's easy for an older head to say, damn, man, we climbed up. Did we go through this before? And the answer to younger people is like, no, we didn't go through this before. That was before I was born. So that's the biggest difference. New people move in, older people transition out. This is why you have to destroy the isms that are laced inside institutions. You have to go at it, just like your lungs breathe involuntarily, boom, 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 boom. You have to go after the isms, especially racism in the United States of America, where it's embedded in. So
do you have
younger people,
do you have hope? Do you have hope for the future?
You have to have hope. And the thing is, you have hope for them because your timeline is a shorter timeline than theirs. The math doesn't lie. I mean, I might make it to 100, but the serious fact of the matter is that at 40 years from 60 to 100 or 61 to 100 is not as realistic as somebody going from 10 to 50 and living in the year of 51. That's where the hope has to turn into plan. You know, that's where the hope has to turn into eradicating all the barriers and barricades that are in their way. Clear path. What do? Do we lead as older heads? No, we counsel and build leaders. Because I firmly believe, Doc, that leadership in any society, I think that area is 40 to 60. I really do. I think the energy is there. Anything after that, I think the energy scales down. I think anything up to that, I think it has to be really encouraged and taught, because that battery of leadership is 40 to 60, where there's a sense of time, there's an understanding for whatever talent that the person might have. They're really is manifested into a skill where it not just works for you individually, but it works for your surroundings and the betterment of your surroundings. That energy, wherewithal, know-how has to be nurtured, taught, trained, ordained. It has to be encouraged. It has to be applauded. You know, all those things got to go into where somebody is like, I'm ready. And it's ridiculous, I think, when a person's in their 70s or late 60s to say that they're leading something, because I don't think, I don't know the physiology on this, Doc, but I just don't think in these times that energy body is there to lead all the people who are looking for answers. So me, I have hope that whole outlook on what leadership is to make these changes skews to a powerful zone, so to speak.
Chuck, I just
yes,
want to piggyback on that, because you talked a lot about like youth activism and like kind of passing the baton from old heads, from the older generation, to empower young people to carry the fight forward. And I wanted to just give a few examples of like ways that students can really advocate around racism, anti-racism, and strategies to increase their resilience and the resilience of their communities. So in schools, we encourage schools to really support young people in campaigns. They're an excellent way for students to get invested in anti-racist work in their schools and in their communities. Student campaigns empower students to take action and become advocates for themselves and for others. When students are creating and steering projects, we find that they see themselves in the work and an active part of the solution. And you brought these all up, like very, very great points. Youth seeing themselves as great change makers is a key for creating long-term changes and sustainable changes, because it builds their agency and their self-efficacy. So student-led campaigns are one way that students can get involved in this work. And another group I want to highlight is Integrate NYC. They're an example of a student-led group that does great student leader work around segregation and integration. Their mission is to develop youth leaders who repair the harms of segregation and build authentic integration and equity in the New York City Department of Education.
Dina, how do you support parents? Because, you know, they're a key part of this. And how do you guys support parents in this work?
Yeah, we support parents in also giving a voice. We want parents and caregivers and families to have a voice in this work as well. So talking about school wellness councils, school wellness councils are a really great way for parents, families, caregivers, community members, and also students to have their voice and their input matter for the school community. So a school wellness council is a group that you can create or join with members of the school community, like the principal, the PE teacher, the health ed teacher, to make sure that wellness-related instruction and programs remain a focus for our children. So if that focus is going to be anti-racist work, is going to be addressing bias and inequity, a school wellness council will really steer and lead it into that direction to really address what's happening in the school community, build up resources for the community, as well as parents. School wellness councils help bring and achieve what's in our DOE wellness policy, which details not only the school expectation for PE and health ed, but how they relate to programs and services that help students practice those self-care skills. Their lunchroom, their health clinic, after school, etc. So you can learn how to get involved in your child's school wellness council by checking out the chat for a link or talking to your parent coordinator at your school or your PE or health teacher.
So being the doctor here, I just want to just quickly go over 6 known treatments of trauma that you can self-apply it or you can do it in a group setting. The first is sleep.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, Doc.
Look,
I was
man.
like saying sleep deprivation
Oh
yo,
my
man.
God. Sleep. You gotta sleep, right? Sleep. Sleep matters. Sleep matters.
Yes.
Black lives matter, but sleep matters, right?
Yeah.
Sleep is number one. Number two is nutrition. You know, nutrition, food is medicine. Chuck, you and I have been talking about this for over a decade. Food is medicine. So number two is nutrition. Nutrition is critical. Food is medicine. Number three, physical activity. Physical activity and exercise. Movement of any type. Any type of movement. Just move, because you can release energy. You can release sadness. You can release anxiety, and you can nurture joy through physical activity. It also frees you. Physical activity is an invigorator of not just the body, but the mind. We have at Hip Hop Public Health, we developed with DMC a series called Hype the Brakes. And so I encourage all of you who haven't seen these series to check out Hype the Brakes, helping young people energize. Physical activity is key. If someone asked me, what is the one recommendation that I want to give to people who really want to maintain their health and become healthy, it would be physical activity. The fourth thing, number 4, is mindfulness. Mindfulness, being present in our mind and being curious about the moments we do any of the other things like eating and exercising and sleeping. So mindfulness is critically important. Number five is what we call talk therapy. We should be in dialogue with a professional. We should be speaking to our peers. We should be any opportunity that we feel supported to use words to release our feelings and our thoughts should be embraced. Talk therapy. Talk to someone. Don't keep it in. Talk to someone. And number 6, and the final one, a lot of you are going to relate with this, is healthy relationships. Healthy relationships. Experience with others where we feel that we give and get from the relationship. And that connection has to be based on trust. It has to be based on respect, and mutual value. Those are the 6 things we can all do for free to really help treat trauma. And so I'm just curious, Chuck, that you live a very busy life, always on the road. How do you kind of maintain your own mental health? How do you maintain your own physical health personally?
Well, I think one thing that works for me is that the art has always set me free. So I always was in the art and also athletics. So I always got turned on by sports. So that moved, my body and my mind. It's just like when I was on tour all these times, I would just go back to my room and just do art, and so but I was rare because art is one of those things that has to be taught to you, because a lot of people and most people have art in them, but you kind of got to be encouraged to get it out of you, and then where it has to come around to be like sort of your self-satisfaction type of thing. And a lot of people might not, look at it that way. They, people, especially in this country, they're taught to be consumers. So they don't have their time filled with things that are innate or within them. So they got to go and consume something to make them happy or satisfied or relieve their stress. And we have to turn that around and thinking that, okay, you got to reach down in your pocket to find yourself a pacifier. I think it's like, what are those attributes that are within your grasp or within you that you can actually say, boom, I'm okay. I don't have to take a medicine. I don't have to get high. I don't have to get this drink. But I think that starts at an early age, like you said. How do you find that self-satisfaction out of something that you can do as opposed to something you could go out and get?
Yeah. Same question to you, Dina. What do you do for physical and mental wellness?
Yeah, for me, it's really about finding joy in things as well as the relationships I build with people. Being with my family, being with my friends, doing a picnic in the park. Like, that's one of my favorite things to do. Anytime things are tough, things are not looking well, things are stressful, gathering my tribe and going to the park and enjoying each other, enjoying outdoors, enjoying fresh air, enjoying just being among nature. Those are the things that I try to do to really take care of myself as well as build community with those who care about me and love me.
Thank you so much. Chuck, do you want to say a quick word about the Pilates?
Yeah, man. Pilates was something I think that, you know, at an older age, you know, stretching, the yoga regimen is good. But I just think that a lot of people, especially, I mean, I was traveling around the world and going through different time zones. Sleep is important. What you eat is important. If you have a very hard regimen of doing shows, either you're going to do the shows or the shows are going to end up doing you. And when it came down to activity on the stage, what it did is you stretch yourself out. You don't beat your body up. So a lot of cats, when they get to a certain age, they think that, you know, you got to beat their body up to be in shape. And it has something to do with your intake. It has something to do how you stretch the older that you get. So it's totally different from, you know, from before.
Thanks, Chuck. And I just want to say that there is a pandemic within the pandemic. You know, 42% of people have already gained an average of 30 pounds since the pandemic began.
Yeah,
due to less exercise.
It's
right?
real. It's very real.
And people eating comfort food. You know,
Yes.
In fact, you know, we've seen like 10% of people have gained 50 pounds. You know, so Americans have expanded in the last year from a weight perspective.
And doctor, you see, I mean, CVS and well, not to, you know, throw the drugstores out there, but I have to call it like it is. I'm not in that business, but CVS and Walgreens, the amount of liquor that they were selling. I mean, I know they was. I mean, I saw more liquor in CVS and Walgreens and Rite Aid than what would be in the bodega.
But you know what's even more addictive for our children is sugar, Chuck. Sugar.
Oh yeah.
You know, the average American eats 17 teaspoons of sugar every day. That is 57 pounds of added sugar a year. 57 pounds, man, of added sugar every year. And sugar's addictive. It's a highly, it's you know what? It operates the same way as cocaine in our brain.
Right.
And we should only be eating, as young people, children should only be eating no more than 3 to 6 teaspoons a day. That's about 12 to 25 grams. And that depends on their age, their size, and their activity level. So, you know, we're in a moment where the pandemic has caused so much stress. A lot of people are eating a lot of comfort food, but we need to really pay attention to this pandemic within the pandemic, because obesity-related diseases actually kill more people. They kill about 678,000 people per year. COVID has killed about 580,000. And we're expanding those obesity-related illnesses right now. And so, you know, I just want to first close up here by going over to Dina.
Dina and Doc, I'm gonna catch this plane.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chuck.
I really thank y'all so much. Thank you, Dina, for all the insight, and not just insight, but actual practical things that are going on that we all could plug into. And Doc, you know, peace, love, you and Lori forever, and let's keep doing this. And I thank you for this.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay.
Thank you. So, Dina, the school wellness councils. You know, play a really important role of the Department of Education at the DOE and Office of School Wellness. And can you share a little bit more about the school wellness councils in the final minutes, and perhaps share how parents can get involved with the work that your office is leading?
Yeah, definitely. So, like stated before, a school wellness council is simply a council of concerned school community members. That can be parents, caregivers, family members, students included, and people in the school staff that are getting together and rallying and advocating around or it could be one, it can be a few health related topics or wellness related topics, right? That can be around social justice, it can be around health education, it can be around physical activity and education, it could be around school food, etc. There's many different things that Wellness Council can tackle. And it's an opportunity to have these various stakeholders come together to find solutions to the issues that are concerning the school community in some way. And so we really encourage families and students to get involved in school wellness councils in their school building, because they can really be extremely effective ways to get wide scale and sustainable long-term change in their school community, as well as their general living community. Also, in terms of parents and other resources they can get to help themselves and their children, I just want to give a shout out to one of my favorite Instagrams that I found recently called So You Want to Talk About. It gives really clear and concise information and resources on difficult topics, including racial stress and trauma. There's a lot of great resources out there on Instagram and TikTok, and we know that our younger students are primarily getting their information from Instagram and TikTok. So it can be a really great way for young people to get information. And there's also a lot of racist misinformation out there. And so in health education, we teach students how to discern or be able to tell what is credible health information and what is not credible information. And we ask adults to do the same for that as well.
Well, on that, I just want to thank you so much, Dina. You've been incredible. It's been wonderful to have you on. I'm so grateful for the partnership that Hip Hop Public Health has with the Department of Education. You know, Chuck was incredible today, but then we had Dougie, we've had DMC. We've had a really great ride with this Weekend Wellness Initiative. I just want to say a thank you to all those of you who tuned in today to listen to this conversation. I hope you've learned something. We try to keep it as real as possible until next time. But let us end with a mindfulness movement video. Let's get some chill physical activity right now and flow into the rest of your day. This is one of our hype breaks videos to help young people energize. Thank you all.
Hi guys, I'm Mark.
And I'm LaShawn.
We are gonna flow it out. You're gonna breathe in and out and give back to your body. So take a breath with us here. You ready? Here we go. And breath. And exhale. Take it down, deep breath in. Exhale. Good, now we're gonna flow by the step. And you want to shoot the energy right through the top of your head, other side. Step all the way up. It's going to come right back to your center. One more time, just like that on each side. Boom. Back and center. Other side, up and there and back. Now you're ready for tempo. And you flow it out to your body. Up and back. One more. Yes. What? Other side. Hey. Now to your friend. To a friend. Hey. Back. And up. Release. One more. What? And center. And then we're going to come back to that breath. And breathe in. We always come back to the centering breath. It's good to do throughout the day. And release deep. Breath in. Exhale. Now we're going to add some shoulder rolls, right? Right here. Big circle. Circle it out. Circle it out. Big circle. Now center circles, both shoulders go up and back. New move, we're gonna tick upper body. So it's gonna go boom, hit, Each part of the body flows. Tick. Everywhere you can bend, just bend it. Get it out there. Yes, one more slow. Boom, hit. It goes right through the neck. It's gonna feel weird, but just go there. Boom, hit, up. There it is. Now smooth it out. So smooth. Right? So it goes through every part of the body. And flow. Yes, I felt that one right through my neck. Did you feel that? Now we're gonna go tempo. And boom. I like those sound effects. Boom. Good, now you can get your whole body into it, right? So I'm doing levels, getting taller, shorter. Back to those breaths. Release down. Drop it. One more, get a little lower. Use the whole body, that's what it's there for. Shoulder rolls back, big circle here. There it is. Two more. Now center yourself. Boom. Nice. Now we have the flow with some isolations right here. So it's a flow, flow, a yes, yes, a flow, flow, other, Now we add that leg, just you lift it up. Here comes those isolations, right? Big chest. Lift to the side, back and up. Yeah. Now slow, smooth it out, smooth around. You're still flowing it out. Other side, up, boom, back. Up, side, back. 2 smooth circles, right? You're going around the world. Back to that flow, flow. Hey, the flow, flow, yes. The flow, flow, what? We both said what? Add that leg. Lift, lift. Nice. Breath and centering breaths, calming breaths, and release. One more. Deep breath in and release. Shoulder rolls, big circle. There it is. Nice. Can you get a little lower for me? There. Now center it out. Now we're gonna do half of the body with a flow. You with me? Watch. So we're gonna go flow one side, other side. It goes in, out, and in. You can get lower. And then you get tall. There it is. Now we're gonna groove with it. Side, side, and stop. Side, and stop. Hit that exhale. Boom. Ah, flow. Flow, yes. Now new move. So it's slow, slow, flow, and stop. Slow, slow, flow, and stop. Tempo. So think water or a snake. Yeah. And flow, 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 and stop. Last one. Big breath. Inhale. Ooh, we are in that break. Release, right? So you want to catch your breath in between. And release. Shoulder rolls. You got this one now. Big circle, bigger circle, bigger circle, and center it out. We have some stretches. You're gonna love these. So we're gonna take one leg back, step back, and use that thigh for support. You're stretching out your hamstring, back of the leg. Deeper stretch here. Can you pull your toes? Maybe reach the floor. Nice, and flow it up, roll it up. And then other side, you're gonna take that other leg back, right? So if you do one leg, you gotta do the other. Thigh for support, feel it back there. Pull those toes. Yes, reach the floor. And then roll. Oh, feels good. Now, front of your legs, steady on one leg, grab. You got this. Bonus round, get tall, get tall, get tall. And release other side. Grab that leg, stick the landing. Boom, and then lift. Yes. And release. And then we gotta end on the stretches. Here we go. Breathe it out and in. This one feels good. Release. Last one, big breath. And great job, guys. Have a great day.
Attention young people, shoot for 60. That is 60 minutes of physical activity every day.
You gotta